Hey kids, okay, this is day 3 of our Art Speak Week, and today's moderator is our very own Mr. Sun, and he will be introducing our master artist.
Hello, welcome guys. I'm Mr. Sun, and I teach the 3D Industrial Modeling and Character Sculpting class, and I am your moderator today. So today is really exciting because we have the great pleasure and honor of having Stephen Wacker, who is an amazing producer for Marvel. He is a longtime Marvel Comics reader, former senior editor for Marvel Comics, where he supervised and developed many titles including Amazing Spider-Man, Daredevil, Captain Marvel, Hawkeye, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Miss Marvel. Currently, he is helping develop new content across many of Marvel's entertainment creative avenues, like publishing, animation, theatrical, and digital new media. And currently, he is an executive producer for the series 616 and the Hero Project on Disney+. So today, Stephen will take us through many of the projects he worked on and the things he learned from studying the arts and applying them in his work field. Also, we have special guest, Tim Smith, who is also a Marvel artist, who will be talking about his role and give us some advice on how to be a professional artist in the work field. Please type your question in the chat along this talk, and I will ask Stephen and Tim along the way. All right.
All right, thanks, Gordon. Here we go, guys. I know everyone must be very excited about sitting in front of Zoom for another hour today. So thank you very much for joining. I know Tim and I are super excited to work with artists who are just sort of starting their journey and figuring out what your life in art is. You know, looking at your lineup this week, this awesome lineup of people who are speaking to you, I think I in particular stood out as someone who is not an artist. I'm going to say that up front. But it is my job to work with artists. And my hope is today I can give you some insight on what to do when you're out of high school, when you're through if you go to college, through that experience, sort of landing those jobs in an artistic field and what that's like, give you some tips along the way. But, you know, I work in an office, which is probably what no one on this call wants to do. But it's also a place where we need artistic people, or people with good taste, or the ability to at least recognize good art when they see it. So first, what I thought I would do is sort of quickly take you through my path to where I am at Marvel. I've been here a very long time now, but I did not start out as someone who wanted to be in comics or to produce content or do any of those things. I sort of fell into it. And if I can try sharing my screen here. Hopefully, let's try this. Here we go. All right, can that be seen? Yep. Does it say my name? Yep. Okay, great. So that is my name, and that is what I do for a living. Like I was saying, I did not start out on this path. Where I actually started out was with, I wanted to do this. Oh, wait, hold on. You still see? Oh, look at that. Nice job. I wanted to do this. That was me. Working at, can everybody see that embarrassing picture I've never shown outside of my house? Tim's going to take this memory back to work, probably.
Oh, God, this is amazing.
So I would have been applying for your musical theater or performing arts programs. But I was lucky enough to fail at that. And it led me on another path where I applied for a job in comic books. I'd been a comic book reader my entire life. That used to not be something you brag about, but you're all lucky enough to live in a world where that can be seen as pretty cool. And I was able to use that knowledge at a job first at DC Comics, working on characters like Batman and Wonder Woman and Superman. And eventually it led me to Marvel, where I got to be in charge of some of the greatest characters. Let's get off the slide. Some of the greatest characters in the universe, mainly heading up Amazing Spider-Man. which was the thrill of a lifetime to work with some of the greatest artists in comics, some of the fantastic writers, some of the best inkers, which is a step along the way of creating comic books, and we'll talk a little bit, because they are generally first drawn in pencil, then the inks are there to enhance the pictures and get them ready for printing, working with colorists and designers and letterers. And it was a dream come true, sort of working within that art form and finding new talent. And like I said, working with legendary talent. The name I think would probably resonate with most people here is Stan Lee, who I brought back into Marvel, to Spider-Man. He wrote a bunch of Spider-Man stories for me, and I got to learn from him. And he got to pass down his sort of experience down to me a little bit. It's a badge of honor for me when I realized I had the same job that Stan had at one point, because he is sort of the legend in comic books. But within Marvel, I was able to do some stuff that was very meaningful to me and very fun, and I've seen it leak into the outside world. Another book that I edited.
Stephen, sorry to interrupt you. Your time and presentation notes are showing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I don't know how to stop that, so I'm just going to keep going.
Okay, cool. All right.
Well, maybe if I'm out, that doesn't matter. Nobody cares, right?
Yeah.
I got to work on Captain Marvel and redesign that character's costume and see it come to life in film. I got to work on Hawkeye. I got to work on Daredevil, sort of relaunching all of these characters for the 21st century. I got to work on this blank slide, which was very fun. I designed that myself. It's supposed to look like that. Venom was another character we brought back. I got to work alongside an editor that worked for me named Sana Amana on developing Ms. Marvel, who is a young hero from New Jersey who will have her own TV show in the next year or two. And of course, the book I'm most proud of, Marvel Apes. Now, let me take 4 hours to explain Marvel Apes to everyone, because I'm sure there's a lot of quick questions. So I was in comics for a very long time. I left a few years ago to work in Marvel animation, which sort of expanded the types of artists that I worked with. I moved out here to California and worked on some of our animated series, like in Avengers Assemble, Guardians of the Galaxy, Spider-Man, and sort of creating stories that was bringing in, hopefully some of your younger brothers and sisters perhaps into the Marvel fold, and sort of showing them the breadth of characters and adventures that we have. Another space is I evolved from working in animation to Marvel's television and new media areas. We've just launched this next one, Marvel podcast on Siriusxm, where we have a slate of podcasts that are deep dives into the Marvel world, telling stories you may not know, featuring people you may not know are huge Marvel fans, in shows like Declassified, and there's a rapper named Method Man who has his own show now where he talks about his love for Marvel and interviews people. So I've helped develop that content. And then on the TV area on Disney Plus, we've got shows like Hero Project, where we went out and told these mini documentaries about kids who are heroes in their own community, doing things that are super cool. It could be helping to clean water for communities, helping teach kids how to read. The kid there with the football, his name's Adonis. He is a blind football star in his school. A young woman named Gitanjali Rao, who I mentioned, who cleans water in her community, was just named the Time Magazine Kid of the Year. If you don't know what a magazine is, Mr. Sun can explain what magazines were. But her story is just blown up in a big, big way. And what we did also, along with telling the stories, is we created comic books about these kids and told their stories in a different medium. You can probably hear my dog in the background. He's very excited about the delivery. Also, as you can see, we've got more documentaries telling stories about the Marvel Universe that you may not know about. There was an old Japanese Spider-Man show back in the 1970s that was huge in Japan and is one of the craziest TV shows you've ever seen. Spider-Man and the giant robot there. And then Higher, Further, Faster, which is the story of all the incredible women who have helped build Marvel along the way, going back to our earliest days. And we've got Lost and Found, which was sort of a dive into Marvel's more obscure characters. So I worked on each of those shows in sort of a producer capacity. And where I sit at now within the company, because I worked in so many different places, is that when these filmmakers come and they need artists, I'm able to guide them to some of Marvel's great artists to help tell their stories and help our artists understand what they're trying to do and why they should spend why we're asking so much of their time, because they've already given us so much of their talent, the ability to tell their stories. The hundreds and thousands of creators who have worked for Marvel throughout the years is a pretty fertile ground. Everybody's got their own stories, their own way in. We're going to hear from Tim in just a minute, talk about his path through comics. So it's been pretty exciting. Another project I worked on is Marvel Spotlight, which were these plays. We created plays for schools based around some of our characters. We see Ms. Marvel, Squirrel Girl, Thor, and Loki. We enlisted some experience and new playwrights to bring our stories to a new audience. My hope is that as time goes on, everybody gets a Marvel story somewhere in their experience along the way. Whether you come in through the comics, through the movies, through the TV, through these plays, you've at some point in your life had Marvel presented you in a cool, fun way. And I was lucky enough to get working a little bit on the Spider-Man video game. I don't know if anybody plays video games. It might just be me. But it's one of the coolest games I've ever played. And to be a little bit of part of that, along with the games team, was super, super exciting. And that was a quick look through my path, because it led from that kid doing goofy stuff at Six Flags to working with guys like Stan, who are, at the center of so much of our popular culture now, and are artists, an artist in his own right. Just to prove I'm not an artist, I guess you can see this. This is evidence for a cover. I wanted Tim to see this.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love it.
This was for a Spider-Man cover sketch that we did. I think you can see on your screen what that became in the hands of someone with talent. And I thought it was a good example of the things that, it was a good example of how you don't have to have art talent necessarily. I know I'm speaking to a group that does, but you don't necessarily have to answer every question right away, because sometimes it's about collaboration. And what was able to happen here, I was able to take this ridiculous drawing and have an artist who turned it into something that made sense. This is by Adi Granov, who's one of our most popular artists. He designed the armor in the first Iron Man film. And he was able to take that basic idea and turn it into something that was much cooler. But that said, we can't get to the final step without going through the first steps. And if anything, that's sort of been my experience. You have to sometimes have to start someplace that makes no sense. It doesn't feel like it'll work at all to get to a place that's effective. It takes a lot of failure to make a success, which is a good lead in to Tim Smith.
I failed so much with very little success.
Tim is one of my favorite people at Marvel. He's an artist. He's worked inside Marvel and outside of Marvel on things like Teen Titans, Sonic the Hedgehog, Tim, what am I missing here? I forgot.
For Marvel, like, I did some X-Men, some Spider-Man stuff, independent stuff, Hardy Boys, as you can see on the bottom of your screen. So as I just dive right in as you've got this skill, right? And you want to put your portfolio together, and you just go out there and you just want to do whatever you can, and you take whatever you can with the work that you get, and you do the best you can with it. So in my career, as we're going to go through these slides, like really quick, so I can start telling you some pro tips, because I think you all want to know, how do you get to where you want to be, or how do you get to be seen in the art scene or whatever it is. So we'll just go through this. And as your career goes, you got to be open to change and be able to work with people. So the first slide you see there is an independent project. And what it does is give you a wrong direction.
I know, sorry.
All right, Stephen, we have some questions.
Okay.
Sorry, Stephen, we have some questions that some students want to ask.
Sure. You want to do that before Tim, before we get in? Tim, you cool with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
So Melena Smith asked, how did you go about getting a job with DC and Marvel?
What happened was I was living in New York, and I had written and produced a show that played off Broadway for a couple of years. That was all about the history of comic books. It was a comedy with a little bit of music, and it was relatively successful. It wasn't a hit, but I was able to pay my performers. We made enough money to cover sort of our weekly grind. And that played for a while, and it was all happenstance from there. Eventually, a couple of editors from DC Comics came to see the show, and they started to come pretty regularly. And somewhere along the way, they asked me if I wanted to apply for a job. That was that was 20 years ago this year. And from there, it was simply applying for the job and being very lucky. I worked at DC for about 6 years. And at that point, Marvel made me an offer that I could not refuse, and went over to Marvel, and I've been there ever since.
Nice. And another question, Luke Snyder asked, what is your role as a producer? How much business is involved in the job versus how much creativity?
That's a very good question. And what tends to happen at Marvel is, more often than not, the creativity gets wrapped up in the business. There are people at Marvel who just come from a business standpoint. Like, you need people to make budgets. That's just the sheer truth of it. But even at those levels, you know, they tend to have either some love of Marvel or some need to be attached to something creative. I think it is at the same time important for creatives to have some sort of business head to them. I think, to be blunt, the history of almost any creative art form, going back to Shakespeare's time, is creatives getting taken advantage of sometimes. And I think the ability to understand a budget, I'm not saying you need to be a master's in business, but to have some, at least, comfort in that world is important. That said, my job is not much on the business side. It's mostly helping with the creative. There's been 4 or 5 projects just today alone I had to type a bunch of creative notes for. And it's also, you know, the job of where I sit is sort of the junction between creative and business. I sometimes have to explain the creative, I have to explain the creative side to the business people. So I have to be able to speak both languages a little bit.
Yeah,
so that's it. I don't know that I can put a number on what the percentage is, but if I had to guide someone in a direction, I would always push them towards creative, because that takes more time and energy. You can always learn business, or at least have a friend, or hire an accountant. But the world will never have enough people creating things.
Got it. And then we'll do one more question, and then we'll let Tim resume.
Sorry, Tim. My story was very popular with people, as you can
No,
see.
see, I like it, and it's the side that I think people need to hear. I think it goes unheard of, and it definitely can help.
Okay, yeah, well, one more question, and we'll resume the questions later on. But yeah, one more question. So Kaylin McGee asked, how does one gain some sort of audience as a small artist for their comic, especially online environments like social media?
Boy, this is great. I think Tim's going to hit on some of that. I mean, that is probably the #1 question I get when I still do portfolio reviews at conventions. And that's probably, that's up there. It might be the question I get the most. You know, it might not feel like it, especially during a pandemic, but as artists, you are lucky to live in the greatest time ever in terms of reach. Those screens and keyboards in front of you are idea vehicles that will take you anywhere and get your work seen. I have, you know, in my looking online for artists, I am probably 2 clicks away from an artist who lives in the smallest village in China, or in the Philippines, or anywhere around the world. And I've been reached out to by artists all over the world. And that ability didn't exist even 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I tell people a lot that, and Tim, I'd love to get your perspective on this, but there's no need any longer to wait around to be discovered. If there are people on this call, if you have the Jones to make a comic book story, you could start that now. Well, wait till after this presentation, but you could start it tonight. And if you finished it in a week or 2, you'd be able to put it up and have people see it and get feedback on it, and have an audience. I think everyone here is aware of that for even just your social media accounts. You have people looking at your brilliant thoughts and your dumb thoughts and giving them the exact same weight. It's amazing to me the advantages you have coming up now. Now, the downside of it is there's just an avalanche of content on any given minute of the internet. And the question then becomes, how do you stand out? But you have no chance of standing out if you let that be sort of a barrier. You've got to first put the time and the energy into actually creating something. That's the one thing that has not changed. And that kind of work is what separates generally people who have a career versus people who end up working in offices. That sort of commitment to work is always going to be important. Tim, you want to talk about that a little bit more, because you speak with even more young artists than I do.
So like, to give you a really quick example, like when I got started in the industry, as every artist, and maybe not every artist, I'm being very broad, but most artists seek approval. You show your work and you want someone to say it's good, you're the golden kid, I'll hire you. That's your dream. And then when the reality hits that you show your work and they say, you're good or you need more work, or maybe I have something for you, and you walk away feeling a little empty-handed, you're still seeking approval. So that was years ago, right? Fast forward today, when you have social media, you have all these websites you could host, you have Kickstarter. If you heard of like crowdfunding, you put your work up, you show it, you say this dream come to reality for this price, help me out. Patreon, you got all these other avenues to showcase your material. You no longer need someone to say if you're good or not, because the confidence can come to you much more quickly, and you don't need that validation. So you can get started rather quickly on a career, or at least a fan base, because a fan base can take you so much further. To piggyback that idea, a lot of artists I feel will look at someone's work, professionally or unprofessional, and say, I could do that, right? Like you go to the museum and you see a giant painting with a red dot in the middle, and you'll say, how did that get into a museum? I could do that. The fact is, that person didn't wait for approval. That person just did it, and it got seen. And they may have been the first person to do it, or maybe not. They may have been the 100th person to do it, but that person dared to put it out there and be seen, and then got what they needed from it. And that's kind of where we are today. With the internet, you could just put it up and be seen, and hopefully be seen enough, get enough likes, and no one's going to argue it. If you did a stick figure and someone looked at that and said, I could do that, but it got 1 million likes, you're going to get work. No one's going to argue it, because you've got a huge fan base, something's happening, and you put work up. A lot of people have seen that, or maybe heard of the banana with the tape, right, on the wall. I don't know if anybody's heard of that. You can look it up. It's a banana that got taped to a wall, sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And, every artist is looking at that like, how? That's a banana taped to a wall. How did that happen? Well, a person may have been the first person to do it. They dared to do it, and they got seen, and they got what they needed. And that's what you need to do.
Awesome.
Awesome.
What is appearing on your?
Questions?
Oh, you want to do quick questions? Or you want to?
No. I was going to say I can go. If there's no more questions for you, we can just dive into these pieces of artwork.
Why don't we do that?
We can open up more.
I want to, yeah, and then we'll come back to questions. In a little bit. Can you still see my screen?
Yeah, we can still see it.
Is it bigger now? Bigger?
It's bigger. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, full page, a lot of detail. So just to go right into this, so I can, and myself and Steve can give you some pro tips of how to advance yourself as an artist. When you draw pages, this is a page from an independent project I did years ago. As you can see, it's just some pencil. It's got background, it's got some characters interacting. You want to pay attention to some storytelling. When you show a page, the background is a character, just like the artist. This could be Spider-Man talking to Mary Jane. It could be anybody. It could, the backgrounds and the foregrounds and the character all matter. Next slide. We're gonna go rapid fire on some of this stuff so we can get to some.
Hold on, buddy.
Okay.
Trying to do the next slide. I can't get there.
I'll just keep talking so it's not, you guys can get something out of it. When you, I'm not sure, show of clicks, I guess, of those who want to do comic book artwork. I got some concept artwork in here as well. You want to make sure you show your work not too futuristic. You want to be able to show you can draw spaceships and cars, like spaceships and aliens and monsters and things like that. But that's very specialized projects I've noticed in my career. Your sense of drawing so that you can show your work and have the editor or the art director look at that and say, this is the person I want because I feel like they can handle anything that comes their way in a script or some type of layout, is to be able to draw all kinds of things. So trucks, in this case, you got your truck, you got a pole with wires. There's not a whole bunch of background going on, but you get a sense of where they are and the scale of what they're standing next to and the weight of what happened. And that's kind of what you want to show in some of your work. That's why I showed this slide. Next
Tim,
one.
I hadn't seen this before. This is pretty amazing. I'm just curious, when you started, were you were you a big movie guy, or were you just comics? Like, where'd your visual sense?
All right, that's a good question. So I think when I first started, I wanted to draw men in tights. There you go. I wanted to draw Spider-Man. I wanted to draw bulging muscles. And I really thought that was important to break into the business. I went to the local comic book shop in my neighborhood, and I saw what was going on in the racks, and my eyes seemed to only focus on the Incredible Hulk fighting something, smashing something, and it was amazing stories. And I tried to draw that. So once I learned that it was more to that, like I kept trying and trying and trying and failing, I learned that I need to draw more cinematic scenes. So a good place to start, like where I started, or at least try to understand, because I didn't have a teacher, I was a little self-taught in the very beginning until I got to college, was I'll take a scene from my favorite movie, and I would draw that scene, or I would draw what I felt that scene would be. So then I had this cinematic appeal to the work I was trying to do. Mind you, my artwork was not that great at the time when I was trying to do it, but I was still learning. And you will constantly grow as an artist. A pro tip as I go through these slides and answer questions, look at your favorite movie. It could be Transformers, it could be a soap opera, it could be a comedy, and redraw that scene shot for shot, like the minute that you look at it, like redraw the scene in your own way, but draw the angles, draw the vase on the table, draw the building in the background, and you're gonna start to learn where you need some improvement. And it's not just people in the scene, it'll be like everything around it. So when I got started, that's kind of how I approached developing my skill at storytelling, was looking at how the pros did it, but not just looking at comic books, looking at movies as well.
I can definitely see it in that third panel. There's amazing.
Thank you.
Whatever that semi truck flipped over and then just keeping the characters in silhouette. I can see that in a movie. That's a great moment.
Yeah, thank you. That's skills of trying to apply what I've learned. Like,
keep it up,
you
kid.
build
You
a
might have a
library in
future.
your mind. Yeah, maybe. You get these. You build your mental library of all these objects and things that you've drawn. As an artist, you're going to do research to get the object in the 1940s tank versus 1960s tank just right, and you're going to draw it. That scene with the monster coming in, slashing. That's just a cool page. I thought be visually pleasing to see as somebody getting ripped to shreds by a monster I designed. This was for a project, again, that I worked on years ago. Almost made into a movie. Did not. You have to pick. Another pro tip here is you can't do anything alone. It definitely takes a village to make a comic and make a project and make an IP, as they call it. So in this particular project, it was going well. The co-creator I was working on with, we got a movie deal. He decided to be a really hardball on the deal, and it never got done, which was a bummer. It got so far only to fail for this person not wanting their baby to be taken advantage of in such a way they felt like it was supposed to be done. But I say that as an example of what you have to remember is you have to work as a team. If you can, find someone you can trust, find that person, work together, get stronger together. It's hard. COVID makes it hard, but there are still ways of collaborating. Come together and put a project together. You will get much faster. Nothing is built solo.
I think that's the most.
Does take a team.
I think that's the most important thing that's going to get said today, because it's true of everything I've worked on in my career. The collaboration is most important, and the ability to work with people there is integral. There the sort of paths you can take where you get to make all your decisions alone are very, very rare. You will need to work with people, and you will depend on people along the way. And the ability to be able to do that is probably one of the most undertaught and most important things that an artist can learn. It doesn't mean you don't fight for what you believe in, or you don't push your vision, because that's part of what you're being paid for, ostensibly. But especially with the kind of stories that Marvel tells, it can involve anybody from a writer to a game designer to a letterer. So many people who it is your job to convince them of sort of this of what you're trying to create. Creativity is all about communication, and that's also true sort of with how we work as well. So if you remember nothing else, remember what Tim just said.
Yeah, definitely a team effort. Yeah. So here is some Sonic the Hedgehog, and I put this in here in case there are some artists out there that draw more cartoony and more representation of what a character of a person looks like. You can still get work drawing 3 fingers and 1 thumb. In this case, I worked with Sega. Because when you're doing comic books, you put 4 fingers and 1 thumb on there, and they're just like, wait, watch those fingers, looks like sausages. Which that third panel, that guy got a little bit of a sausage finger hand going on, but you get the gist. It's a hand. I worked with Sega on a lot of this work, and they sent me 5 boxes, no kidding, 5 boxes of reference for Sonic, from video games to cartoons to everything that Sonic appeared in practically. And it still wasn't enough. I still had to make up certain scenes and shots and get it approved, working with Sega.
You got to keep all of it?
Yeah, but I
That's cool.
It was so much, I tossed it.
No.
I did. It was too
Sad.
Too much. It was. I couldn't hold on to it. It was like Sonic in like every pose imaginable. And it's like, you know what? I've drawn Sonic in so many ways. I could draw Sonic in my sleep right now. But in any case, these pages are Sonic the Hedgehog. If any of you are video game and Sonic fans, next one, please. I think it's just a few more Sonic pages just to show you. Keep in mind, you can get work drawing some cartoon stuff. And when you draw cartoon stuff, it's a different type of storytelling. You need to represent the property. A lot of the shots of Sonic the Hedgehog and his friends are straightforward shots. You won't see too many behind the shot, like behind the head shots, too many crazy angles. You really have to represent the property and tell the story to the script, because you have a lot of people paying attention to it and approving it. Not like comic books where.
Is that a rule to have the characters facing out? Or is that just what you've discovered?
And it is. It's like it's a small rule. I did storyboarding for Dora the Explorer and Avatar: Last Airbender, and shots had to be. I learned that shots had to be front on. They want the way you're going to recognize a character is not from the comic, but on the movie screen, the TV screen, and plushies and posters and toys. So to make the property sell and be recognizable across brands, you need to see Sonic's face straight on as often as possible to get it in your head. I like Sonic and I need to buy more Sonic stuff, t-shirts, shoes, whatever it is. The more you do that and show that in your work, the more the company is going to say, this person can represent our property. We want this person to draw it. A lot of shots, behind the head shots, or you want to be really dynamic with your shot, so it starts to make the character look too wonky because it's too dynamic. They lose faith that you could do it and let the brand run across many platforms. So yeah, as you know, there's a Sonic the movie that came out, and when it came out, a lot of people hated it, so they had to rework it to make it look more appealing. That's a good example. I put these Sonic pages in here because when that movie came out, it went through a rework, and that's what I needed. Yeah, we should move on. I shouldn't talk about Sonic for too long, right? So
I want to hear more about Dora and see if you had an opinion on swiping.
On Dora, and that's a whole, that's a lot there, but we'll leave it. So here's
this page is grossing me out. I don't want to look at this one too long.
Yeah, let's move on. Ink work. I inked over my work. Face still torn up. Nothing changed. Next.
So let me ask real quick, Mr. Sun, is inking part of the visual arts curriculum at all?
We had like a ballpoint like pen challenge like earlier this month where it's kind of like Inktober kind of where they're all challenged to do it, but yeah, it's definitely in our curriculum.
Okay, because I've spoken with groups before. Not everyone always understands sort of the art of inking. The joke about inking is that you're just tracing over the pencil lines, which is so not true. And despite how gross this page is, you can see how much Tim was able to add to it just through the shading. And Tim, you can talk about inking a little bit. There's so many options in terms of brushes and pens and what that can completely change the look of a piece of art.
So you got two major types of inking. that happens today. You got traditional, someone picks up a brush or a dip pen and they go right on your page, and then they try to interpret what you have given. If you take the edge of your pencil and shade lightly from light to dark, and you give that to an inker, they've got to interpret that gradation to any style that they want. Then you have digital, where you have a lot more tools at your disposal on your screen, and you can translate that way. A lot of artists are doing it themselves. A lot of people team up with others so that they can get their work inked. So that's a little bit about inking. Definitely take the time to learn how to ink your work so that when you draw it, if you are interested in having someone come along and ink it, you'll understand what they're seeing and how to read it. Here's another, oh, go ahead.
I had a question. So to be a comic book artist, is it necessary to learn like the traditional inking skills, or can you just go all digital?
What inking does is it used to be a good way for print. It was a cheaper way to print, and it was a good way to have the work be seen in its detail for the way the printers were back then. Nowadays, you could do it in so many different ways. You can go just pencil, you can put some ink to it to give it a nice look. It's more, in my opinion, a style nowadays than it is a need to ink. So if you are interested in that type of style, a little bit more classic comic, manga, American comic, manhwa, whatever, however you like to read your books, you may want to consider inking and picking your style of ink with a brush or by digital, and learn that perspective of your artwork and how it's being seen. It will definitely rework the way you think from brain to hand to paper when you start to translate that from pencil to ink. It's up to you nowadays. It's strictly style, a look.
Got it.
We do work with a lot of people who do ink themselves digitally now, which then that did not used to be the case. In fact, the sort of inking to, pencils into inks is really the core, one of the core collaborations in comic art, and throughout comic history. So many of the great artists that have come up with comics have only been as good as the inkers who worked with them. And they would go from book to book to book to book because that was the team. Yeah. That was the look you wanted.
Inker will save you. Like, I've drawn some really wonky perspectives, and sometimes my muscles may have looked a little weird that I didn't catch. Like, sometimes you just don't catch those things. You're just trying to get the work done. And an inker has come along and saved my life to straighten things out where I needed them to. So definitely big praise to any inkers out there. It's an art form, it's a craft. Certainly learn it if that's something you're interested in. And this particular piece you're seeing, this is just a sketch I did just to show that some traditional wash. I did it for Inktober. I called it Pinktober. I put a P in front of it. And I got a lot of hits on Instagram, so I do that every year when I can. That's basically it. I just let my creative mind flow, adding a little ink, adding a little gouache, watercolor, just to let my hand do something that I don't have to really think about and go to later, look back on later. Next one, please.
Hold on. Oh, sorry.
All right. This is all digital stuff here. This is just me doing concept art digitally. I find concept art to be really fun, really loose, open, and I find that art directors and companies love to see how your brain can think creatively in an open sandbox way. Nothing here is going to be written in stone. Nothing here is ever meant to see publication. For anyone out there, any artists out there that just like to scribble their ideas down, they don't like to keep it tight. They don't like these pin-up shots. They like to get the idea out there. People can see that, interpret it, get a feeling of what's going on, and move with it and make millions of dollars off of just a sketch and a doodle. I don't know if I've ever made anyone millions of dollars, but I have turned a lot of heads with concept art and sketch art that I have done to get the feeling of what I'm doing more so than something that is going to go to print. Next one, please. More concept art. When you do stuff like this, when I do stuff like this, I keep it loose. And someone will come to me and they'll say, I need a character that someone was somewhat sad, somewhat happy, likes to play video games. Go. You're like, man, that could be anything, anybody. Where do you start with that? Sometimes I'll do this. I just throw a bunch of junk on a page to get the idea of what that art director, what that editor, what that storyteller is trying to understand what they want out of a character. And then I can start refining things. So yeah, I just thought I'd show you guys this in case there was some people out there.
What I love about this page of sketches, as someone who can't draw, the face on the very far right gives me a lot of hope, Tim.
Oh, awesome.
The sort of stick figure face there. Yeah, the screaming one. I feel like that's something I could accomplish with a lot of work.
You should. And yeah, me too.
So talk about this beautiful watercolor
this is
thing.
me this is all digital, actually. All digital concept art that I have done to not only keep my hands moving, my brain moving. I want to show this for anyone out there who have trouble drawing figures and still need some time to develop that skill. Focus on that, but take a minute to stop and look at the environment. Look at the environment and how do you translate your work just like you would drawing a person running in on the street in a suit or a costume with the underwear on the outside, which is crazy, right? When we're underwear on the outside, no one in a movie would wear that, right? But you may want to focus on your background and give just as much hints of interpretation of a rock. Like you see that river flowing down into the foreground and you got those rocks in the foreground and you got the water hitting them. It's just like a painting. You could make something kind of hint towards what it's supposed to be, and it actually looks more interesting than a photograph because you got these misty undertones of vapor and foliage. So that's what this is. It's just concept art. Just me being artistic with it, showing that you don't have to draw something photorealistic to show that it's realistic. Same thing here. This is if you want to do video game art or video game concept art, this could do it. Like this could get someone's attention. I hope it gets someone's attention to say, hey, here's a magical forest scene. Your eye leads from left to right, swirls around to the center. You have a focal point, which is that thing in the distance. You want to draw something that feels like you can dive into it. Like I feel like I could walk from foreground to background. There's a small story being told here. There's a journey being had here, all in one scene. If anyone is interested in doing concept art, or even if you draw your first panel on a page, let it tell its story. Let it sit back and say to the viewer, you know with confidence what you're putting down and you're guiding the attention of the viewer into what they're supposed to look at.
And when you started to break in, was digital art already happening, or was it still sort of a vanguard?
When I broke into comics, I guess a little backstory on me is there was no digital artwork. It was still drawing with paper. I would draw on a piece of paper, I'd mail it to some editor or some artist. They would hopefully send it back with sketches and say, this is where you suck. And I would use that, and I was humble enough to say, okay, this is what I need to do. When I got started, it was no digital artwork. Everything was Photoshop or scanned and then touched up to be printed. Digital made it much more interesting.
Where I was getting at, did you need to teach yourself digital, or did you go somewhere to learn?
For me, I taught myself digital art. I really, really wanted to understand digital material as well as traditional. I feel like I'm really good at traditional. I'm not going to ever toot my own horn, but I feel like I'm good at traditional. But to translate that digitally was a tough climb for me. It just felt so mechanical on a computer to break things down so much to a pixel. But as time went by and I really stuck with it, I got really confident with my digital skills, and I had to teach myself because I just felt like school just, it was there, but I already did the school thing. I went to Pratt. I went 4 years. I went to 2.5 years at Pratt. Before that, I went 3 years in another school. I did the school thing and the art thing. It was time for me to get out into the world, and I taught myself digital to get to where I wanted to be. In a nutshell,
and Pratt is, in case some people don't know.
Pratt is a college. I think it's considered the Ivy League of art colleges. They've got 3 of them, to my knowledge, around the world. There's one here in New York, where I am. I think there's one in Paris, and one, not one in Paris, and somewhere else in Europe. I think there's another one. But I went to Pratt, which is a really good school. School is definitely a place you should go to and consider to further your artistic career. These are more sketches. This is just me sketching. All digital. Me just getting my ideas. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Like looking at this, I can see the eye is just a little off. So just sketching. You should always keep your hands moving, just like riding a bike. You never forget, but you keep your hands moving. Keep drawing.
You've obviously developed a skill to be able to draw in a lot of different styles too, which I guess has commercial importance as you try to find jobs, but it also is an example to me again of how lucky we are in this time we live in, because the audience is so wide and so vast, and there are so many different tastes that it used to be at Marvel, like you pretty much had to be able to draw superheroes in 1 or 2 ways, and that was how you got work. They had what they called a house style. Now, and you're getting it this week with the amount of artists who are talking. I know you guys take on Monday. You had Miss Glasser from the Fancy Nancy books. Like that style is probably what people would think is un-Marvel is possible. And I look at it and think, boy, I would love that at Marvel. I would love to experience all sorts of different art tastes. And that wasn't always the case, at least with the Marvel audience. There's a wide array of opportunities, no matter what your style of drawing is.
I want to back that up and say, because Steve brings up a really good point. When you're drawing, like, style is definitely a diverse style will help you get jobs for sure and be seen. Diversity in your artwork will not, it extends more from just style to who you draw. Draw Black people, draw white people, draw Asian, draw everybody. Especially in today's world, we live in a very broad society. You should be able to draw all kinds of faces in an environment, body shapes as well, to be seen and understood that this person can draw people in an environment and get attention that way. It definitely helps. A lot of jobs I've had, I've done that and I've gotten work from it. Oh, yeah.
What's your major in Pratt? Illustration?
My major was illustration. I did take graphic design as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then I pushed myself to study more graphic design in the after hours. So I figured the best way to do that. So in the daytime, from 7 o'clock to 5 o'clock, I did art all day. I drew and drew and drew. And from 6 o'clock to midnight, I went to the computer lab and I did graphic design to understand computers. Which was not in my major. I wasn't paying for those classes. So I would sit next to the graphic design kids and pick their brain on how to work Photoshop and InDesign and all these other programs. So from 6 to midnight, I did that. And then I went home, did my homework, and started all over again the next day. I worked very hard. I'm not saying anyone should do that or not. It's up to you. But that is what I did in college.
Did you annoy your graphic design friend by mooching off his education?
They love me. Everyone loves me. Everyone. No.
Oh, really? Is that true?
No, that's not true.
Yeah, I think that's the great thing about like art colleges, like because there's so many majors, you could like learn a lot from each major. Like if you make a friend or like a connection there, you could just always like go up to them and just be like, oh hey, can you like teach me this and teach me that? So yeah, that's a really nice thing.
And I think they really appreciated me kind of hanging around and talking to me, and just someone extra in the lab to just joke around with and get homework done. And the more they explain things to me, I think they understood it for themselves as well. Here's another concept art piece. It's just, I just like doing concept art. Little bird.
I love that. I'm obsessed with that little bird just hanging out, that little cardinal.
Like I can go into like how like good concept art and how, but I know we're running on time, but just bear in mind that your backgrounds and drawing environments is just as important as drawing people. Contrast. This is an example of contrast, really. You got this nice red bird in the middle of all of this like gray, kind of muted color. So the bird stands out, very organic setting with this one organic element in it. So yeah, that's why I thought I'd show this. Think about the things that you draw. Everything has a meaning. Everything should have a placement in it. Try to be conscious of what you're drawing.
I think that's all I have to share. So I'm going to stop here.
Yay. All right.
I have another question for...
Yeah, hit us with any
so for Tim,
questions you have.
Luke Snyder asks, do you ever get discouraged by seeing how good your coworkers' art is, or do you find it doesn't bother you?
Basically, he's wondering, Tim, do you get discouraged working with me? I
Steve
think
makes me
that's
nervous.
what's really being asked.
He always makes me nervous, but that's in a good way. When I look at me personally, I look at any artwork I see as a challenge to do better than, before I start to think why that artwork is good on its own. And I should be thinking the same like that. But I think most artists feel when they see work, they can't help but to compare it to themselves. You should definitely break yourself out of that mindset, but you should also bend with the wind instead of trying to fight it. And if in the beginning you really want to learn, look at what makes that artwork what you feel better and try to match that and say, you know what, that person drew hands really good. I got to draw hands like that to beat this person, and work on your hand. And that's the simple case. I never was discouraged. I always looked at it as a challenge.
And Ethan asks, how important is it to know photo bashing for concept art?
Wait, say that one more time?
Photo bashing, where you use like photos in Photoshop and you just...
Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought you meant. You know, back before computers, in 2 seconds I'll explain it. We studied by getting magazines. Like Steve talked about magazines as they're like paper, right? You go to a store and you buy it. It's got staples in it and stuff. We would get magazines. We cut out the pictures we liked, and then we would trace it. And it was the best way to learn anatomy. It was the best way to learn composition. So fast forward to Photoshop. It's a tool. Photoshop is a tool. A magazine, an image on the internet, it's all tools. Once you put the work down and start working on it, that's when the true skill comes in and you start to see where you need to improve. So you use your tools to your advantage.
Got it. And let's see. And did either of you guys go to school for art at your age, at high school?
I studied art. I don't know, like Steve, what school?
In like high school.
Did you go to
high school? Did you guys like go to school for that? Like
Not a specialized school like CSArts is, but I moved around the country a lot too. Tim, did you go to an arts high school?
No, my high school is very basic, run-of-the-mill high school, local town. I did take some art classes there, but it wasn't until college until I really started to. So a lot of the things I got to practice was self-taught until I got to.
I'm guessing the next part of that student's question is how important is math class? compared to everything else they do. Tim, how'd you do in math?
Horrible. Not the best in math, not the best in science, but I had a willingness to learn and pass it, which I did. But yeah, so yeah, all the other classes just help you understand your art. If you ask me, like looking back in the past.
For you guys, just get through those classes so you can get to conservatory at the end of the day. Mr. Sun did not like that answer.
Do you guys have a role model for art? If so, who?
Well, that's a great question. I was thinking that too. Like, Tim, I don't know. I mean, I certainly know we've had questions about art that we like, but I don't know who your like guiding light was when you were.
I guess that also like role model / like inspiration that you guys like, you know, find around you. I think that those two questions. Yeah.
I think when I started to my closest role model to say I like comic books is an artist named John J. Muth. He did a series called Moon Shadow. It's really old by Epic Comics, I believe. And it's a comic book where it was painted, and it helped me understand that comic books was more than people in tights. It was a watercolor illustrated book. It had some curse words in it. My dad let me read anything with curse words, a comic book or a novel, as long as I was reading. And he said, if you can read it and create that, that's fantastic. And this comic book had some of that in it. And I just felt like it was amazing. And I wanted, even if I knew I couldn't do watercolor at that time like that, I wanted to do comics because I found that you could tell any story with it. And later in my career, I actually met him. And I was
wow.
It was amazing. And I actually got to work on a Silver Surfer cover that he did. And that was amazing. And then once it got to the computer stage, and I did something in Photoshop and I chopped off some of the artwork. Oh gosh, yes, there it is.
There it is. That's a piece. It is a beautiful painted comic book, and
he's amazing.
It's a book that really sort of elevated the art form. It has aspects to it that feel like a kid's story, but it does get more mature. So beware of that, but it is a gorgeous book. I didn't know you got to work with him.
Oh my gosh, it was amazing on Silver Surfer. I love Silver Surfer, so I got to do a cover. I colored a cover that he had inked, and it was amazing. And then I chopped off some of the artwork in the ink, and he laughed about it. And I was like, at least he'll never forget me. And he signed one of my books that he did, the Moon Shadow collection. And I still have it to this day, and I look on it.
That's cool.
That was my first major inspiration and guiding light to doing comic books and understanding comics.
Nice. And there's a question for both Stephen and Tim. So how do you deal with the pressure on working on such a big name franchise like Spider-Man?
I mean, you'd certainly feel it. I do anyway, sitting in that chair helping to guide the writers and the artists, but there's no substitute for just putting your head down and doing the work. And certainly when we do our Marvel fans can be very rabid. They don't always like everything, and they're not quiet about their opinions by any stretch of the imagination. So you do have to be able to smile through those kinds of things and understand that not everything you do is gonna be loved. But my feeling was always, when I was editing comics, that it was my job to make sure whatever they were paying, $2.50 for that issue of Spider-Man or Captain Marvel or Ms. Marvel, that they were getting a story that was worthy of their time, attention, and their money. And the only way to do that is just to pour, I'm saying it sounds like a cliche, but it's true. You just pour in as much of yourself as possible and push your artists and your writers in ways to create stories that sort of stretch the boundaries. Sometimes it really hits. So I'm just remembering now, one of the last things I did in comics was was the story of Spider-Verse that became, you know, that animated movie a couple years back. That was a story that existed first in comics, and pulling all those different Spider-Mans from Spider-Man versions from throughout the years. It was very difficult. There were a lot of legal problems too that I won't bore everyone on this call with, and it required a lot of artists, and it required it's a big story. It was like playing 6 games of chess in terms of the story. It was huge. So had to work with the writer to make sure the different beats made sense, but nothing replaces just putting the time in and putting your head down and doing the work. Mr. Smith?
You know, I'm going to answer that, but I also have a question for you, Steve. I think it's a challenge to, all right, let's just say you're an artist and you want to break in. And a lot of artists, when they do portfolios or about to do a portfolio, they ask me, what should they show Marvel? And I have 2 answers to that. I'll say, 1, draw any character that you like from any franchise known in the universe. That makes it where you draw what you like, and that editor will see it and hopefully like what they see because you poured love and attention into it. Now, here's the question for Steve. I'll also say, if you're going to draw a Marvel character, you got 2 choices. You're either going to draw a C-level character, which is some character in the background, like who normally doesn't have their own book. They're just in the background. They run to do a meaningless job for Captain America, and they're seen only in 1 page. If you can draw that character looking cool, maybe you'll get some attention that way, right? But then what if you drew Spider-Man? So here's my question to you, Steve. If I was to draw Spider-Man, a 3 to 5 page sample of Spider-Man flipping around the city, are you looking at that and comparing it to the millions of artists that have successfully drawn Spider-Man throughout the history of Spider-Man? Or are you looking at it with fresh eyes to say, here's a cool style of Spider-Man?
Thank you, Tim. I think where my head generally goes, first of all, I love that way of showing a sample. And it's where I urge people to do is come up with a 3 to 5 page sequence of your own. Just make something up. It stretches your imagination. It makes you think about things. It makes you think like a writer, which is also important because the art is telling the story in comics. And I think where my head tends to go is, it's not that I'm comparing you to the classic Spider-Man artists like Steve Ditko or anybody, but I am, if you're trying to break in, I am comparing you to the artists that I'm working with now. Because one, if you're trying to get work now, you have to prove to me that it's more worthy of me hiring you than any of the women and men drawing the book for me at the moment. So that's what makes it cutthroat. That said, not everything has that directive result. So I am looking for someone who's bringing something new, and sometimes you're just planting a seed in an editor's head for a project that might happen 2 or 3 months down the line or a year down the line. It's what the thing that you said, which really resonated with me, Tim, was when you talked about drawing a character that you love because you can make that look its best. That's the kind of thing that appealed to me the most, when I can see someone's love on the page. I do tend to think if you can draw, I don't know, if you can draw Sonic the Hedgehog really, really well, we can work with you to teach you to bring that same energy to Spider-Man or to Captain Marvel or Squirrel Girl. I want to see, sort of the best of you. I would rather see that in a portfolio. Having said all of that, that's just me. And I think every editor, every person at any agency or anything like that, everyone's got a different way that they approach portfolio reviews. Nobody does it the same way. Portfolio reviews, I don't think we have time really to dig into it. That's worthy of a whole discussion, because portfolio reviews, as much as you're getting feedback, it's all about what you bring to that feedback as well. because you might get told some things that you do not agree with or you do not want to hear. And your ability to absorb that and turn it into useful advice can often separate you from other artists and help you rise above.
Yeah, real quick to back that up. One of my first jobs when I got started years ago, I sent my artwork to a comic book company, and they sent me a letter saying, "You're not ready." And they told me all the points I wasn't ready to break into comics and draw for comics. And I said, all right, I was humble. And I said, let me get to work. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from the same person at the same company says, "You want to draw a book?" So I don't know. And I drew a comic, a 30-page comic in 30 days. So
well,
you
that
never
can
know.
happen. That can happen too.
That's so nice though. The company got back to you and like they listed all the things that you need to work on. Like I know like like applying for jobs and you get like rejected. Sometimes just like sorry we can't like hire you at this moment. But that was really nice of them to like list the points. And it's also like important not to like take it like personally, just like constructive like feedback.
The best thing that can happen to any artist is to get feedback, even if it's negative. That meant they cared to talk to you and tell you where you did well and where you did poorly. If they just look at you and say, "Not ready," and didn't even give you another second, then they didn't even really look at your work, or you're not going to get anything out of that, right? So take every word of advice and use it to your advantage.
You still
if they give you,
Sorry, Tim, go ahead. I didn't interrupt.
no, I was just going to say, if they give you negative advice, they care. They care enough to tell you that and use it.
Tim, you still do portfolio reviews at conventions, no?
Yep, I do actually. I only do it if I see a twinkle in their eye, or they come over and they got their portfolio and they just look hungry for anything, any feedback. Then I'll actually pull out some sticky pads and I'll sketch little poses and scenes that they're trying to do. I really break it down for them. I try to help out as much as I can.
Cool. All right, I think we have one more question. So what is the most difficult part of each of your jobs?
Wow.
That's hard to, that's a very hard
Yeah.
I'm not
answer.
going to go
to,
one.
I know, just one. There's just
No,
like, so much anxiety from.
I would say I'll start it off the top of my head. I'll say a difficult part of most jobs, if you're on a creative end, is your time. Time management. So you get a project or you get anything and they tell you we need this done in a week. Anything can happen in that week that could stretch it or not. And then they'll call you again and say, "Oh, can you do it in like sooner?" And you're like, "Oh man." So time is always on your side, and it's also the one thing that can hold you back. My advice to you, if you're working on anything, is to be open. Always be open with your art director or your editor. Don't try to hide anything from them. They hired you for a reason. They believe in you, believe in them, trust them, and be honest with them. That's the only way it can work. It really is. I've always been honest with everyone I worked with. I've seen other artists be dishonest, and it only ended in failure. It'll catch up to them eventually. So for me, when it's a time crunch, I try to catch it as soon as I can. I'll say, I need an extra day or two. What can we do to work this out? I'll do the best I can. And that just, it makes a good character of yourself as a reliable person. So for me, the toughest part of a job is to make sure I get it done on time and to communicate with the people I need to work with to get it done.
In the world of comics, that issue of reliability can be huge for an artist's reputation. And the editors, the world of comics is big, but it's also small. And editors tend to talk to themselves, among themselves, about the artists they know they can trust. So Tim's points there about honesty about your time and ability to get things done is super, super important, because the push to procrastinate is deep, and the push to not tell all the truth all the time about your schedule is also deep. Working with an editor and earning that trust is very, very important. I'm afraid my answer is somewhat similar to Tim's because it has to do with time, but it's a slightly different angle. In terms of the thing that's disappointing to me, it's having to say no to projects, and to turn down creators that you might love and have faith in and might be able to do something cool. But there are so many things coming out of Marvel, and it's just only so much time in my day and only so many resources the company has to create these new projects that you have to choose. And that I find that extraordinarily difficult to do, because there's so much that you want to do, but you're not just always. It's just impossible.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question.
You said that already, Mr. Sun. You're gonna keep saying that after every question?
I think this is the last one.
Is this what he does in class?
No.
I see a yes. A yes.
There's a few students of mine here. Okay, so Jenny asks, do you think reading comics / graphic novels
Whatever the question is, yes.
is a good way to learn?
Yes.
Or do you ever worry that it will diminish your own creativity?
You got to say that again. Say it again for me. I didn't hear it.
Okay. Do you think reading comics, graphic novels is a good way to learn, or do you ever worry that it will diminish your own creativity? Does that?
There you go.
Did you guys hear that?
No, you have to. You absolutely have to. You're building up a library of influence in the same way that great musicians listen to other great musicians. You will always find another way. There are infinite ways to play this symphony, and you will find your own way. And nothing is more important than building up just sort of that library in your head of people who have accomplished something super cool that really resonated with you. I think. Tim disagrees completely. Yeah. Tim says, stop reading comics.
My gosh. Be a farmer. We need more produce. Reading novels is like extremely important. Reading books, extremely important. You should never stop reading. And even from an artist, if you just like to draw, read someone else's journey, read other stories, read realistic, like fiction, nonfiction stuff. It all adds to your mental library of things that you need to focus on. So when you get a script or you get a project, you can add to that from your own experience and research. Also, go to the museum, take a minute to go outside. The pandemic makes it pretty tough. So look out your window a little bit more, and just study the way people walk, the way the wind blows a tree. It sounds kind of corny, but it's really helpful to look at that, read and look and observe. When you draw, I would say like 80% is viewing it. Like 80 to 90% is just looking at the material, and then 10 to 20% is actually drawing it. You got to look at it and understand. If you're in drawing class and you're constantly looking down at your paper and the model is in front of you and you're never looking at the model, you're doing something wrong. You should be looking at that model or the object much more. And that way you're reading your object like you would read a book. Mental, you got to get it in your head. And that's the only way to do it.
The artist's job is to
Stan Lee said that too, right? Stan Lee said to constantly read.
He did, yes. Not to me, but yes, he has said that. Look, I really think the artist's job is to be the reporter for the world. And you're only going to be able to do that by doing exactly what Tim just said, by looking around you constantly. In the dullest situation in your life, there is life happening around you. There is nature happening around you. There is a chunk of wood taken out of a table that's actually interesting, and there's a story behind it. And along with great art, just stories come from everywhere. And the more you can open yourself up to the world, the more you'll have the ability to sort of tell your own story. That was very poignant ending.
It was.
If we can
That was a
stop the
great last
video
question.
right as I said that.
A great last question.
But I could have used some music. Let me guess, Mr. Sun, one more question.
Oh no, that's it.
Or Tim, it's like
Are you
midnight
sure?
in New York.
Well, yeah.
Now, here's one last piece of advice.
Okay.
Don't keep your studio like Tim there. Look at that mess.
This is organized confusion. That's what that is. This is beautiful chaos. That's what that is.
Also the name of my band.
Well, yeah, thank you so much to Stephen and Tim for today. It was like super enlightening and helpful to like hear all your stories, processes, like more about like what the industry is like and all the advice, you have given to the students. So thank you so much. The students are really appreciative.
It was great talking to you. Thank you, Milena. See the message.
Thank
It was
you
great
for
talking
inviting
to everybody. I have a child at CSArts. I love the school. I want to thank you guys for all your work, and I look forward to seeing everyone's. Oh my gosh, there's the Fancy Nancy artist. Hello, Robin. Yeah, just thank you everyone for the invitation. Thanks, Tim, for joining me on this too.
Thank you so much.
Wow.
All right.
All right, A's for everybody, Mr. Sun.